This episode of New Politics was released on the 7th of August, 2026, and produced on the lands of the Wangal and Gadigal people.
Should schools teach students how to think, or tell them what they should believe? And where does stopping anti-Semitism end and protecting the state of Israel begin? Education has to be a tool that challenges propaganda and not something that promotes it. I'm Eddie Djokovic.
I'm David Lewis. All of this is coming up in this big episode of New Politics.
And if you're listening in and haven't subscribed to our website at New Politics, you're missing out on half of what we do. There's regular articles and analysis of this strange world of politics. It's all free, and you can subscribe at newpolitics.com.au. And of course, if you do want to support us, it's just $5 per month at Patreon and Substack, and all of this is a good way to support independent journalism.
Well, as I say, I'm not the expert educator, but you need many touch points to actually convey attitudes or even change attitudes if they've already been embedded in some other way. It's not a once-off. So in the school, we should touch people in primary school and in secondary school, and indeed in the education task force that I'm a member of. We've spoken about what you do, and you might even touch being a tolerant, helpful young person in preschool, and we need to not only be high school, but university and TAFE. So class by class, obviously this has to be in the curriculum or put into the curriculum. For example, there's space in civics and citizenship for understanding what might be taught in English, an English class materials on Shakespeare, where we've got some problems. A class on art, which would be the opposite really, looking at some wonderful Jewish artists like Segal. So a sort of a positive reinforcement. Class in history, they will touch on the Holocaust and an example of anti-Semitism. Class in geography, they're looking at Jewish migration. So that's where I've got to with what they've already provided to me, but I'm sure they will continue to iterate and look at it state by state.
The Royal Commission on Anti-Semitism was meant to be an exploration of discrimination and public safety for the Jewish community, but has now morphed into an exercise of attempting to redefine the national curriculum for all school education all across Australia, starting off in early education environments, all the way up to high school and beyond, and in the process stifling political debate and protecting the state of Israel from criticism. Now, the Special Envoy for Anti-Semitism, Jillian Segal, she wants to have anti-Semitism programs to be included from early childhood settings all the way through to universities, while she's also wanting to have a new national centre that will influence the educational agendas within schools, within governments, hospitals, businesses and police agencies. Now, David, as we always like to point out, reducing anti-Semitism is absolutely essential. There's no question about this, but so is every other form of discrimination that exists in Australia. And also, we shouldn't be in this situation where it's just the one person or a radical advocacy body that is appointed by that one person should be given the carte blanche to determine what Australians are forcibly taught about Zionism, Israel and Palestine. Education shouldn't be used in this sort of way. It needs to encourage critical thinking and not impose the politics of extreme Zionism.
It seems to me part of critical thinking is an understanding that governments or bad governments aren't made up of people necessarily of a certain background, or that bad policy isn't because John Howard was an agnostic leading Protestant. We can't blame every agnostic leaning Protestant for the policies that John Howard brought in. We might not like John Howard's policies. If you're not sure, go and listen to our podcast. But they were from him as a human being. We might not like, let's find someone, Modi's policies in India. We may find them too much, but that's not because he's a Hindu, and it's not that every single Hindu in the world agrees or disagrees or thinks or is like him. His poor policy work, from our perspective, comes from a whole range of other influences, not his Hinduism. And I know that some of it is pro-Hinduism, and that's a problem. But there are millions of Hindus in the world. We could go on. Margaret Thatcher's policies weren't bad because she was a woman. Her gender had, and she's the first one to admit this, let's be fair, her gender had nothing to do with it. So when we criticise the Netanyahu government, it's not that we think that they're bad because Benjamin Netanyahu and his cabinet are Jewish. It's because we think they're bad politicians who we disagree with. And critical thinking allows for the fact that it's not usually your background. And when it is your background, and I'm thinking weird cults, it's to do with the teaching of the cult. Judaism doesn't teach genocide, doesn't teach war as a general practice. Many Jewish people are appalled by Israel and do not identify with Israel, which is politically as it should be. To bring in a thing to say anti-Semitism is bad, that's good. Islamophobia is bad. Sexism is bad. Anti-Asian rhetoric is bad. Racism, because I'll forget someone. Racism is bad. Ageism is bad. What we need to be arguing over is ideas, not people. But to conflate people with ideas, and particularly to conflate a group of people with a wide and varied viewpoint, like Jewish people, is not good thinking, and it shouldn't be the basis of education in terms of that approach. Our Jewish community is an important part of the system. So is our Islamic community. So is our Indigenous community. So is our Asian community. And of course, even putting it that broadly can be problematic, because is our Asian community Chinese? Is it Korean? Is it Japanese? Is it Thai? Is it Cambodian? Is it Indian? Of course, it's all of those. And they're all slightly different in political terms, and each individual is slightly different. For Segal to try and flatten it into anti-Semitism is the absolute worst, and that means you cannot criticize anything that I agree with ever, otherwise you're an anti-Semite, I think leads to very dangerous precedents and diminishes education.
Well, we also had that odd situation of Jillian Segal saying that younger children are more open to changing their views, and this is why this supposed education should be targeting them, the stuff that she wants to introduce. And David, if anyone else said this from any other background or talked about any other issue, saying that younger children are more open to changing their views, there'd probably be a police investigation into them. And we don't live in a perfect world. I think we have to accept that and recognise that. But education should be about developing independent judgment, getting people to think for themselves, and not about exploiting children for pretty much essentially a government-sponsored right-wing and extreme ideology shouldn't be introduced into the classroom. And the other point is that Holocaust education already has a place within Australian schools and the Australian educational system, and that's generally within history and studies of religion. But that's radically different from teaching students that Zionism is beyond reproach and beyond criticism, or that opposition to Israeli government policy is inherently anti-Semitic, which essentially is what Jillian Segal is proposing. And generally, school education should be about providing evidence. History should be based on factual information as far as possible. And given that history is a contested field as well, and we know that, we definitely know that, and you should know that very well, David, because you're a historian. But as far as possible, we should be looking at factual information and looking at different perspectives about those histories or contested histories, and then allowing students to reach their own conclusions. And my sincere hope is that this addition to the curriculum is never actually introduced, or this proposal is never introduced to the schooling system, because it's just basic propaganda. But if it ever is, the question is, if we have that unfortunate situation where this curriculum is introduced, well, the question has to be, will it be compulsory, or will students and their parents have the right to refuse this propaganda?
I'm thinking of somewhere Punchbowl Boys High, which is very much filled with Middle Eastern background kids. It's a fine school, don't get me wrong. I'm not. But how would they like being told, oh, yes, this policy that involves bombing your family, your relatives, your people is right, and if you say anything against it, then you're anti-Semitic. Hold on. A lot of us are Semitic in background. We just have a different religion. So how is that anti-Semitic? And of course, the old trope of the self-loathing Jew comes through, which is hugely problematic. I'm just thinking if Pauline Hanson had said, we have to, and she has, we have to change education so as to spend less time on the stolen generations and Aboriginal issues and more time on the triumph of the white race, she'd be laughed out of, and has been laughed out of, public life. This is essentially what Jillian Segal is saying. We have to prioritise the suffering of one people over the equal suffering of another, while allowing some of these people to commit the type of crime that we're telling other people is bad to commit. So Segal's position, her position has been untenable. It should never have been put in. We had an anti-racial discrimination commissioner. We have one. She's been put separately to that. If they'd put her in as an officer under that, I think it'd be harder for us to complain because she'd be working within a system. But because they've put it separately and then put in the Minister Against Islamophobia or something, who we've heard nothing from because Jillian Segal's sucking up all the air. I think I wrote the article a few months back saying that her position's untenable. She's done nothing to change that. Let her talk, because the more she talks, the more people, including Jewish people, think that she's an unhinged, unfit. Her husband has donated money to far right-wing causes, which she apparently has had nothing to do with. I'm not accusing her of anything, but I'm just saying there are stories that don't clearly add up without further scrutiny. And I think that's fair to say.
This is New Politics, independent analysis of Australian and international politics. For more free articles and analysis, join us at newpolitics.com.au.
I think there's two factors here. Well, first of all, this idea of implementing this curriculum in all schools. To me, that's reprehensible. The other issue is that this is all based around that contentious IHRA definition of anti-Semitism that includes opposition to Zionism and the criticism of the State of Israel. Now, all discrimination legislation in Australia at the moment, it allows for the criticism of a state or of an ideology. And this was supported in a federal court case a couple of years ago where Justice Angus Stewart, he did say that criticism of the State of Israel and the ideology of Zionism is not an act of anti-Semitism, according to Australian law. And he specifically detailed that in the federal court case a couple of years ago. And that's the part that the Zionist groups in Australia do want to change. Now, we just have to have that right to debate allegations of apartheid, of war crimes, of genocide, irrespective of which country is being accused. And conflating all of these issues and adopting this IHRA definition of anti-Semitism into law or installing that into the curriculum, well, that just has to be resisted at all costs. And we'd end up having a situation, if this is all implemented, we'd have this situation where teachers in schools, all the way from early childhood education as well, would have this situation where teachers would be forced to teach this stuff. And if they hold a different opinion about it or want to discuss these different opinions about that as well, they would probably be suspended or sacked, which is exactly what's happening in the United States. And you probably end up having universities calling in the police to stop protesters before the protesters commence. Otherwise, they'd be accused of not providing the safe environment. And people in virtually every walk of life would, because this is the idea, it's not just schools that this will be implemented in. The long-term agenda is to implement it absolutely everywhere. So people in virtually every walk of life would be in fear of losing their job or their funding if they do work within an organisation for something that contradicts this IHRA definition. And to me, it's just totally unacceptable. We cannot have this situation where that is the proposal and that ends up being introduced.
Do we ban Shakespeare because of Shylock, a 400-year-old play that has not changed anybody's mind for 400 years? Do we ban Dickens over Ebenezer Scrooge? Kills the whole idea of A Christmas Carol. Obviously, we have problematic texts like The Hand That Signed the Paper by Helen Demidenko, now Darville, which Robert Mann pointed out was full of anti-Semitic tropes written in the 1990s. So she should have been well aware of that. That was the big problem. And do we ban the book? It becomes problematic to ban books because where do we stop? Suddenly this is anti-Semitic. Okay, yep, fair enough.
Well, according to the IHRA definition, yes, this would be anti-Semitic.
Yeah, okay. But then do we...
Well, that's right. But also what we are saying today, we would be... Well, I don't know how we'd ban ourselves, but we would be taken off our various platforms for contravening the IHRA definition.
Yeah. And yet not even every Jewish organisation accepts it, and some are vehemently against it. You've got to be able to discuss politics. You've got to be able to discuss religion. Now, when I say discuss religion, I don't mean saying every Jewish person is evil and bad and kills children and doesn't eat pigs because they think that the Gentiles are pigs and it's cannibalism or whatever the stupid reason is. We can argue that idea, but we can also accept that people, even who we disagree with, can be fundamentally good people because they are equal to us. They can be fundamentally bad people because they're equal to us. It's not to do with the colour of their skin, the clothes they wear, the religious beliefs they hold. They might hide a lot of their stuff behind that. But we should be able to debate religion. I don't believe in God. I do. What's your evidence? I don't have any. I don't need any. There's faith. That's stupid, isn't it? No, it's not stupid at all because that's the whole basis. God is mystery. It can get heated and it can get very passionate, and we should be able to do that. The whole Christian church is a series of never-ending debates, splits, counter-splits, side splits, as it should be. These things aren't designed, or these things aren't put together or shouldn't be put together so that there's uniform monochrome thought. If these things matter to people, human nuance should matter. And so being able to argue with an Islamic scholar or a Hindu scholar over the very nature of their belief from someone outside that tradition, provided it stays within the bounds of Australian law too. We're not allowed to kill people. We're not allowed to maim people. We're not allowed to blow up their cars. We're not allowed to burn their house down. And this is what a lot of people forget. General Australian law protects us from a lot. We had to bring in the Racial Discrimination Act, which is a shame we had to bring it in, but we had to. And proper anti-Semitic behaviour falls under that. So I don't really know what Jillian Segal wants except to stop the discussion and the condemnation of the current Israeli government's policies towards Palestine.
Oh, and that's primarily the case, I'd say. And as we have to keep pointing out, otherwise we'll be accused of anti-Semitism, and David, we do not want that. But all Jewish students must be protected from abuse, whether it happens at schools or on the street or wherever. That protection needs to be there, but so does every other religion or ethnic or cultural community group. And the issue to me, it's not a question of whether Jewish history belongs in education. If that's what people want to study at high school or wherever, and the subject is available, we'll absolutely go for it. There's no problems with that. I think the issue is, why does one community's history and political concerns, and I think that's the bigger issue, their political concerns, why does that need to have a specialised program introduced at every level of schooling? And particularly when Jewish students just make up 0.2% of the student population in non-Jewish schools. Now, the average size of a school across Australia is 600 students, and of course you got some schools that have got 4,000 students and then some that have only got 10 or so. But the average size is around 600 students. So that means that in non-Jewish schools all across Australia, there'd be an average of one Jewish student in the whole school. And sure, this proposed curriculum isn't going to be directed at that one student. It's directed towards everyone else to learn about all this material. But what is exactly the point of all of this? And Jillian Segal suggested that other things within the curriculum could be dropped to cater for her proposed anti-Semitic teachings. But you just think, where is this all going to end? Should we then have compulsory pro-Islamic or pro-Palestinian teaching, or pro-Italian or pro-Greek or pro-Lebanese, Vietnamese, Chinese, Maybe we could have a bit of Croatian teaching in there as well. But the whole curriculum is going to be absolutely full. What happens with all the other essential education, like science, maths, economics, Australian history, Indigenous history, media literacy, the ability to think for yourself and call this bullshit out? These are all the things that the school should be teaching. There just won't be any time left for that, because the curriculum will be packed with learning about everyone else's history and their ideological obsessions, whether you like it or not.
It's, again, a poorly thought through, which is everything Jillian Segal has said.
But the government keeps listening to her. That's the problem.
Yeah. And each time we think we're rid of her, something happens. The Bondi shootings, which were a terrible thing. Don't get me wrong. But her other report had been quietly shelved. And then it comes out again because this was a thing that was targeted at Jewish people. Sure, maybe it was. But there were a lot of Gentile people. There were Gentile people who were killed too. So suddenly it stops being purely a Jewish tragedy. And I'm not saying it's not a Jewish tragedy, but it's not purely a Jewish tragedy. It's a tragedy that is for everybody. And that includes Jewish Australians. We've got to remember that these people, yes, it was a Jewish celebration, but it was an Australian Jewish celebration. And on an iconic piece of ground that belongs to everybody, it becomes an Australian tragedy. A Jewish Australian tragedy, sure, but still an Australian tragedy as part of that. But I think limiting it to just one group of people when there were others there who were hurt and who were part of it diminishes it in a way that is more harmful to what it means than if we acknowledge the truly broad tragedy of it all.
Well, one other issue is that if this curriculum is ever introduced, I've got a feeling that it's going to be about as popular as herpes. And if it is introduced, I'm hoping that it's not, but if it is ever introduced, it's going to be, I think, more evidence of Australia existing as a captured state by Israel and by the United States. And I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but that's going to be more evidence about whatever the Israel lobby asks for, it pretty much gets in Australia. And recent polling produced by the Pew Research Centre is actually a couple of months old now, and we've reported about this in the past, but it shows that 79% of Australians have got an unfavourable view of Israel. And that's the state of Israel, not of Jewish people, but an unfavourable view of the state of Israel, and including 49% who have got a very unfavourable view. And this is shot up over the past 5 or 6 years as well. So it used to be around 42% or 43% that were unfavourable. And you could probably grab any country in the world and have similar figures, but still it's gone up to 79%. And to me, this mainly reflects the anger over Israel's actions in Gaza and the occupation of Palestine. It's not a sign that Australians have become more anti-Semitic, as alleged by Zionist groups in Australia. It's a sign that people are repulsed by what the state of Israel is doing in the Middle East, West Asia region. And despite all of this Albanese government is going full steam ahead with all of this, even if, like I predicted, there will be a backlash. They're still proceeding with this, and even if it does cost them politically. Now, it's very unusual for a government to push something through that you would expect is going to have a lot of opposition from the public, but it just goes to show how much power and influence the Israel lobby does have in Australia. And of course, they'll deny that as much as possible and then use that power that they claim that they don't have to accuse you of being anti-Semitic and then shut you down. But I think you just have to look at the evidence.
Yeah, and again, that point you made earlier, a Jewish student should be able to feel safe walking onto campus, going to the cafes, going into a lecture, getting into a tute group, even where the tute group is going to maybe be critical of something that Jewish student believes in. They should be able to be allowed to listen to the opinions. They should be allowed to express contrary opinions. And this is where I think most Australians agree, that the university should be a place of free and relatively fair discussion. And Australian society, if you work with a Jewish colleague, they should be able to feel like they can go to work and do their job free of being harassed, free of being felt inferior. There's no problem with that at all. But if they say, oh, look, I think the Netanyahu government's doing a great thing, and someone else working there says, actually, I disagree with their policy, that should be allowed too. Again, you don't go and beat them up. You don't go and blow their car up. You don't bully them at work. But you can have that discussion in such a way that you feel safe in having contrary opinions, no matter how abhorrent they may be. There's a point where, of course, your abhorrent opinions should be curtailed. I believe in the state of Israel is a bit different to I agree with the Netanyahu government, which is a bit different to I think the Islamic population in the Middle East should be wiped out. At what point do we say this is unacceptable? I think we all know the answer to that.
Or someone like Pauline Hanson saying that there are no good Muslims.
Yeah, absolutely ridiculous. And she was called out for it, should be called out for it, and it should be something that defines her political career. Again, Pauline's narrow, unimaginative, non-creative view of the world is appalling. The best we can do is fight against the idea. I've said before, she should be able to go to Parliament House and do her job. Ha ha.
But we should be allowed to criticise that ideology that she's got, or
exactly.
And then we should be able to do exactly the same with the ideas that are being put forward by Jillian Segal, and we should be able to criticise Israel and should be able to criticise and critique the ideology of Zionism.
Yeah, exactly. The second we don't have free debate in the country, the second we don't have a country. We have a group of compliant sheep who the wrong people are getting scared for.
That's it for this episode of New Politics. Thanks for listening in. And if you value independent journalism without the influence of corporate backing, join New Politics at newpolitics.com.au and support us directly. It's just $5 per month, and we always try to keep it very simple. If you like what we do, please send some support our way. It keeps our commitment to independent journalism ticking along. I'm Eddie Djokovic. Thanks for listening in, and it's goodbye to our listeners.
I'm David Lewis. We'll see you next time.